Hi, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be painting an abstract picture on this canvas here, and I have all my art supplies here ready to go. But before I get started, be sure to click subscribe. For this first step, after you unwrap your brand new canvas, you'll feel how rough it is. And I remember learning from art class in high school, and that was ages ago. If you paint with your brush on a rough canvas like that, it's going to wear the bristles down. So take some sandpaper, not too rough, and just slightly sand over your canvas. And then your canvas won't have that rough feel to it anymore. This canvas measures 11 by 14. And I don't know what it's going to end up looking like because I don't have a lot of ideas right now. But that's the great thing about abstract. It can come from your imagination while you're creating. So let's see what we can come up with. I have different colors of acrylic paint, some glitter paint, gray metallic paint, and some tempera paint. Without a palette to put paint on, I sometimes use a washed out plastic container that would have been in the garbage. One man's trash is another man's treasure. And a washed out yogurt container for water to clean the brushes. I thought about starting the painting with a bright color like yellow, and I had some yellow tempera paint, but there wasn't much in the bottle, so I had to pour a little bit of water into it to get as much paint out as I could. Since it's only the background on the canvas, I figured the watered down paint will eventually dry. And I had to remember to paint the edges since a lot of canvas pictures aren't framed. I wanted more than one color for the background, and I wanted them blended together, so I figured an orangish color would be good. The brush that I used for the yellow was a little too big, so I decided to see what a sponge brush would do. I like the lights and darks of the orange that the sponge brush made. And I wanted to cover all the white of the canvas. If I wanted white, then I would use white paint instead of a bare canvas. To blend the two colors together, I brushed the orange over the yellow very lightly. Then I used my paper towel to clean off some of the orange from the sponge brush before I blended the colors a little more. After blending, as well as using a clean brush over the yellow again to make streaks like the orange, I had the idea to paint a bluish color across the canvas, but I had to wait for the yellow and orange to dry because I didn't want the blue to be blended in. And instead of a solid strip of blue, I wanted to blend a lighter blue into the middle of my darker blue strip. I got blues blended together and I let the paint dry. But I didn't like the strip of blue going across the canvas all by itself, so I wanted to see what it would look like if I outlined it with black. While outlining, it would have looked boring with a simple outline, so I painted some thicker black parts that were a little spaced out. However, I didn't like the look with the thicker black parts, so I decided to make those parts more creative with extra colors. After throwing together several little lines of brown and white, I liked it better than the solid black, but it still didn't quite meet my approval, so I had to think of something else. I thought it would be interesting to add some texture to it, so I found an old pan with gravel. I didn't want the dirt, so I shook the pan in hopes that the dirt would move to the bottom and leave the gravel on top. I had to pinch out a little at a time, and I placed the gravel onto a laid-out cereal box. When I had enough gravel, I knew it wouldn't stick to the canvas without glue, so I grabbed some Elmer's glue. I put glue on one section at a time, and I made sure to cover the entire area. I had to add the glue slow enough to not accidentally put glue outside the areas. Then I took the cardboard with the gravel and I made a V shape to make it easy to pour onto the glue. I I covered all the glue, and then I pressed down softly and gently just to make sure the tiny rocks would get settled in the glue. Okay, so I glued the different sections of rocks onto my canvas, and I let each section dry before moving on to the next one. And after each section dried, I poured the rocks back onto the cardboard so I could pour it back onto the canvas for the next section. I lightly tapped on the canvas to get off all the loose gravel. I think I like the gravel a lot better than the paint beneath it, and without intentionally painting a river or a stream, my blue strip and gravel kinda gave it that look. But one thing I still needed to remember was the edges. When you do the edge of the canvas, you'll want to stand your canvas up so the glue doesn't run down onto the table, so you'll need something to prop it up. I found a couple of plastic boxes here. So after I glue it, then I will lean it against one box and put the other box on the other side, and it will stand up just like that. Doing the edge was a bit tricky. I had to hold the canvas up with one hand while I poured on the gravel with the other hand. And I had to just let the excess gravel fall onto the table. I had to make sure to cover all the glue. I waited for the glue to dry. By this time it was after sunset. We don't get much sunlight in winter. And again I tapped on the canvas to knock off any loose gravel. Speaking about winter, the next morning we had snow on the ground. Now back to the painting, it still looked empty around the blue paint and gravel. I had to add something that could go with what looks like water and rocks, so I found some sand, and I couldn't think of any other way to add the sand other than with glue. I wanted to see what it would look like if I had a strip of sand on each side of the blue and gravel, but I didn't put glue right next to it because I wanted to leave a touch of the orange and yellow between the blue strip and the sand. While pouring the sand, I made sure to cover all the glue. After giving time for the glue to dry, I poured the excess sand onto a laid-out cereal box. My 2 strips of sand didn't turn out like I hoped it would. I wanted it to be more rounded like the glue was, but it dried somewhat flat. Then I got an idea. Instead of having just 2 lines of sand, I thought about putting on another thinner coat of sand, and I would spread out the glue with my finger. Instead of making another line, I wanted to give it a puffy look. Again, I made sure to cover all the glue, and I repeated the process for the other side. And the same as before, I let the glue dry and I poured off the excess sand. After I added the thin puffy looking coat of sand, I put on more glue and sand on my 2 lines of sand to build them up, and that made them stand out more. The sand is all done, including the edges of the canvas. For the next step, I was thinking about painting something in the bottom corner here, maybe something wavy. I found another container to use for water that wasn't a yogurt container. And now I'll be using white paint. I have my paper towel ready, and I'll be pouring the paint onto cardboard this time. There's my paintbrushes, and time to get started. I quickly found out I was using a brush too big, so I switched to a smaller one. For temper paint that's more watered down than acrylic paint, I had to paint it on thick. I learned that temper paint dries flat no matter how thick it's painted on. After the white, time for some gray, but not just any gray. I wanted to be creative with shiny metallic gray. Using a small brush, I left just a thin strip of white. I didn't worry about the bottom edge of the canvas because of my idea for the other corner. Look how the metallic paint shines with light reflecting off of it. Now that I have white and gray, do you know what my next color is going to be? Yep, you guessed it, black. Now it's time to paint on the black. Just like I did with leaving a thin line of white, I painted on the black with leaving a thin line of gray. After painting on the black, I added some other colors, and these are the two colors I used. The brush that I used was flat on the end, so I could just dab on the paint like this. And now that I've done black, it's time for white. I had to lay it on thick because it didn't look like it was covering the black. When I was done with the white, with the paint still wet, it looked like a mess. I had tried using a bigger brush to smooth it all out, but I couldn't smooth out tempera paint. And for some reason, some of the black was coming off, probably because tempera paint is a much watery paint than acrylic. After the tempera paint dried, I painted white acrylic paint over it to cover the black. But when the acrylic paint dried, it looked like it was cracking. To try to fill in the cracks, I painted on one more coat of watered down tempera paint. When that coat dried, it still looked crackly, so I had to just leave it like that and move on to the next step. With the blue and green colors on the black, I did the opposite on the white. I put the green on first this time. When the sponge look of those two colors was done, it was time for more black. Almost done, just a little more white and the two spongy colors. And now that this corner is completed, it's time for the other corner. I'm going to start out with more metallic gray. I had the idea of painting something inside a quarter of a circle, and this time the metallic gray will be on the outside instead of white. And I had to remember the edges. All done with that. Now to wait for it to dry. And this is why I didn't worry about the corner of my other design on the edge of the canvas, because I knew I'd be painting over it. Next, I'll be painting on some green. I thought about leaving just a thin line of the metallic gray, just like I did on the outside of my other corner design with the white and metallic gray. The design that I had in mind would go on top of the green, so I painted the green on the entire corner. And how could I forget the edges? For my design, I had to sketch it out on paper first. If I would have painted it on the canvas without sketching it out, it would have looked like a total disaster. On the canvas, I marked the center point with a pencil. Still using a pencil, I drew my swirly lines. And now I'll be using lighter green and gold glitter paint. The light green is done. I stopped the camera to save you some time. Yes, it takes me more time to paint than it does for you to watch this video. Here's what it looks like with the glitter all done. Notice I left a thin line of light green on the outside of the glitter. And now to wait for it to dry before I do the edge. Otherwise, gravity could make the glitter move to where I don't want it to go. While the edge of another one of my paintings is drying, let's add more to this one, shall we? Now that we have the glitter here in the corner, it looks empty in this orange area, so how about more glitter to fill it out? With white right next to the orange, let's try some silver glitter next to the white. And with silver next to the orange right here, maybe some white glitter next to the silver? There's only one way to find out what that would look like. I put the glitter on the canvas in the area where I wanted it, and then I used a smaller brush to move the glitter over to the white strip. Okay, I think you get the idea. Let's speed this up. Oops, I got some on the white, but no worries. Glitter paint can be moved around, so I'll just rinse off my brush and move the glitter off the white. There we go. I want to move the glitter right next to the white to cover as much orange as I can without covering the white. This is going to take a while, and you'll need some spare time to watch my other videos, so I'll speed this up for you. Now I'll dab just a little here and there right in this area. I wanted to make it look dissolved out from the bottom on up. And now time for the white. When it was finally done, I waited for it to dry. When it was dried, it was time for the fun part, to see how all the glitter shines. And now that the bottom half of the canvas is done, what do you think I should paint on the top half? It looks a bit empty up here compared to the bottom half. Since there's no pink anywhere, how about some pink? And I'll add some white as well as pink glitter to balance out the glitter so it's not just all towards the bottom. I'm going to try using a round sponge. And I need to make sure to cover the entire surface of the sponge with paint. Otherwise, I won't get complete circles. Oh, look at that! I still didn't get a complete circle. Good thing there's plenty of space to improve. It looks like I need more paint. Let's load it up again. Look at all that paint. Maybe if I kind of rock the sponge around to put pressure on all areas of the circle. Yeah, it looks like that works. And it worked again. Now we know how to get the entire circle. This sponge idea sure does use up a lot of paint. Now I'll just touch up some areas. Time for some lavender, and I'll be using a paintbrush. I'm just dabbing on some paint here and there, and then adding white to give it a blended look. Almost done. Just a few touch-ups. Done. Do I like the looks of it? No, I don't. It looks like it needs more white. How about the sponge again? It's looking a little better. Look at that texture! And this is acrylic paint, so we'll see if the texture is still there after it dries. We already know it wouldn't be there with tempera paint that always dries flat. But I'm not quite done with this. It doesn't look pink enough. So I'll rinse out my brush, dry it off, and dab on some pink in various places. After that, I will use more white paint and my round sponge to blend it again. As you can see, I turned the sponge to blend it. By turning the sponge on the canvas, I assumed it would move the pink around to give it a better blended look. Don't worry, I didn't forget the edges. Not quite there yet. If a painting doesn't have the artist's approval, then it isn't done. This time I'll be crazy by adding splotches of more lavender and pink before I blend them with white again. I think I like this look. I actually intended it to look like pink clouds, but it turned out looking like fireworks instead. I later painted a two-color border on the outside of it, including a metallic color like my lower left corner design, but it was hard painting good lines on a texture. And these are the two colors I used. I soon discovered that my pink glitter paint was as hard as a rock. See? Look at that. And I couldn't get it off the brush. Instead of glitter paint, I decided to try some glitter glue. But I found out that it doesn't hide what's beneath it. I could see my dark metallic color through it, but I didn't want the metallic line so thick, so I had to thin out my line by painting more yellow. I didn't want glitter glue on top of the metallic color, so I left a tiny bit of yellow right outside the metallic paint. I had to squeeze the bottle pretty hard, otherwise it would have taken forever to get the glitter glue to come out. Then I used a small brush to move the glitter paint right next to the metallic color. As you can see, this stuff just moves everywhere. Again, I need to wait for it to dry. And check out the acrylic paint of white and pink at the top. When it dried, the texture stayed. Then after it's dried, what next? It still looks empty at the top, so I'm thinking about adding some blue. I have 4 different shades of blue along with some bluish glitter. I also have so many curved lines on the painting, so I thought about giving it more of a variety by doing some straight lines. And how to get straight lines? I'll be using some painter's tape. I tear off the length that I need, and then I tape it down to my acrylic fireworks. Now that it's snowing again, it's a good time to stay indoors and do art projects. After the weather warms up, I'll be using my woodworking tools to show you some things I make out of wood. In the meantime, I have some of my woodworking items for sale on eBay, including a DVD of chip carving as well as a huge variety of other things, so check out my eBay store. Now back to the painting, I'm going to paint on the lightest blue. I need to make sure to cover the entire top edge of the painter's tape along with some of the area above it. Then I will wait for it to dry. After the paint has dried, it's time to take off the tape. It looks like the tape worked for getting a straight line. A little bit of blue got outside the line, but that will be covered up with glitter. For the next step, I will tear off another length of painter's tape. I want it to be parallel to the edge of the lighter blue, but if I cover up the bottom of the blue to not paint over it, then I can't see how parallel to it my next line will be. So here's the trick. I will put the tape on top of where I want my next color to be. After that, I will tear off another length of tape, and I'll tape it down right at the edge of the other tape. Then I will take off the first tape, and the edge of the tape that's left on the canvas will be parallel to the edge of the light blue paint. Pretty clever, huh? Now I need to make sure the tape is all stuck to the painting. Here's the color I already used, and next will be a blue that's a little darker. The same as before, I cover the top edge of the tape along with some of the space above it. And when it's all dried, I take the tape off. This line didn't end up quite as clean as the other line, but it's probably because I'm painting on top of multiple layers of paint, including a texture with the white and pink. Next, I'll repeat the process. I'll put the tape where I want the edge of the next color to be. I'll tear off more tape. I'll put it right next to the edge of the other tape. And I'll take off the first one. Now moving to a darker blue. I waited for it to dry. Time to take off the tape. Well, it looks like this line is no better than the other ones, but we can pretend this is the look that I wanted. A somewhat cloudy line instead of a solid line. For the next shade of blue, I repeat the process with the tape. You already know how it goes, so I'll skip the video past this step. Now I paint on the darkest blue, allow time for it to dry, and then take off the tape. Here they are, 4 shades of blue, and I'm down to the final step of painting. Time for the glitter paint. But I will skip this step in this video too. I will put it on the same as all the other colors of glitter paint. Now, after weeks of working on this, I finally have it all painted, including the edges. But it's not quite done yet. I'll be adding some Mod Podge to part of it, so if you'd like to see this project totally done, take a look at my first Mod Podge video. And the reason why I say first is because I'm hoping to make more than one. That's all for this video. I sure learned a lot from experimenting throughout this project, and I hope you did too. If you'd like to see more art techniques, watch my other art videos and please subscribe. Every subscription helps.